Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the soft, shimmering world of the Tang Dynasty, where the Silk Road's endless trails weave through dusty markets and starlit deserts, shaping not just trade, but the very art of naptime. Picture yourself in Chang'an, the capital around 700 CE. You're standing in a chaotic bazaar, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and camel sweat, as merchants hawk bolts of silk so fine they catch the sunrise like liquid gold. This isn't just fabric, it's the lifeblood of an empire, a currency that buys dreams, alliances, and maybe a decent night's sleep. But fair warning, you'd probably trip over a stray goat or haggle yourself into exhaustion before surviving a day here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Chang'an, the heartbeat of the Tang Dynasty, where the Silk Road begins its long, winding path. The city hums with purpose at dawn as traders from distant lands, Sogdians with twirled mustaches, Uyghurs in felt caps, even the occasional Roman straggler crowd the West Market. You dodge a cart piled high with silk cocoons, their creamy shells glinting in the early light. These cocoons, spun by silkworms fed on mulberry leaves, are the empire's pride. Legend claims Empress Leisu herself discovered silk when a cocoon fell into her tea, unraveling into shimmering threads. That's the mainstream story etched into Tang lore, but historians still argue whether Leisu was a real figure or a myth spun to glorify silk's origins. Either way, you're surrounded by her legacy silk bolts in every shade from indigo to saffron, stacked like treasure. The quirky truth, silk wasn't just for clothes. You notice a merchant slipping a tiny silk pouch to a scholar who tucks it into his sleeve with a wink. These pouches often held charms or poems believed to ward off bad dreams. Superstitious, sure, but in a city where sleep was a luxury, you'd try anything. You weave through the crowd ears, catching snippets of haggling in a dozen tongues. A camel grumbles nearby and you stifle a laugh. Those beasts are the unsung heroes of this trade, carrying silk across deserts but smelling like a gym locker left in the sun. The market's rhythm is hypnotic, lulling you, despite the chaos. You pause by a stall where a vendor offers you a sip of fermented mare's milk. It's tangy, weirdly soothing, and you wonder if this is how Tang traders unwound before a nap. Chang'an's market set the stage for the Silk Road's reach, connecting China to Persia, India, and beyond. You're not just standing in a city, you're at the edge of a global web where silk shapes not just fashion, but diplomacy. Emperors gifted silk to secure alliances, while merchants traded it for spices, glass, even slaves. The wealth it brought funded palaces and temples, but it also trickled into daily life: silk pillows, curtains, even bandages. You spot a healer wrapping a wound with silk strips, claiming they're cleaner than linen. Sounds plausible, but you're skeptical. That's probably more sales pitch than science. As the sun climbs, the market grows drowsier, vendors slumping against their stalls. You feel it too, the weight of the morning, the promise of a nap. Maybe it's the silk all around you, whispering rest. The market's edges blur as you imagine the Silk Road stretching west, a path you'll soon follow. A kid runs past, waving a silk kite shaped like a dragon, and you chuckle, someone's already dreaming before bedtime. The city's pulse slows, and you're ready to move on, carrying the market's hum in your mind. You're trudging now, boots sinking into the dusty trail just outside Chang'an, where the Silk Road stretches like a ribbon toward the horizon. The air's dry, tinged with the faint musk of camel fur and the sharp tang of desert sage. You're tagging along with a caravan, its wooden carts creaking under bales of silk, so heavy they make the axles groan. These merchants' faces, weathered like old leather, squint into the distance, scanning for bandits who'd love to snag their precious cargo. You're not exactly built for this trek, one wrong step, and you're face planting in the dirt, probably to the amusement of a nearby goat herder. The Silk Road's no joke. It's a lifeline, but it's also a gauntlet of sandstorms, thirst, and the occasional grumpy camel spitting in your direction. The mainstream fact here is that the Tang Dynasty at its peak around 700 CE turned the Silk Road into a global highway. Chang'an was the starting point, sending silk west to Samarkand, Baghdad, even Constantinople. The empire's control over key routes like the Gansu corridor kept trade flowing, filling imperial coffers with taxes. But here's the quirky bit. Merchants often use silk as currency. You see a trader hand over a bolt of crimson silk to buy a horse, no coins needed. It's wild to think fabric could buy you dinner or a ride, but that's how trusted silk was. Historians still argue whether this barter system stabilized the economy or just made tax collectors' lives a nightmare. Imagine auditing a pile of cloth. You're walking beside a camel now, its swaying gait almost hypnotic. The beast loaded with silk, each bale wrapped in coarse burlap to protect it from dust. You notice the driver, a wiry man with a sun-creased grin, humming a low tune. It's not just for show. Those songs passed down for generations help keep the caravan's rhythm like a lullaby for exhausted travelers. You try humming along, but your throat's too dry and you end up coughing instead. The driver chuckles, offering you a sip from his water skin. Its lukewarm taste, faintly of leather, and you're pretty sure it's not FDA approved, but it's better than nothing. The trail winds through a rocky pass, and you spot a small shrine tucked into the cliffs, a nod to the gods of safe passage. Merchants pause to leave offerings, sometimes a scrap of silk hoping for luck. You're tempted to toss in something too, but your pockets are empty and you're not sure a lint-covered mint would cut it. The sun's climbing, baking the ground, and you feel your eyelids droop. The caravan's pace is relentless, but there's a rhythm to it, a slow sway that makes you think of nap time. The drivers know it too. They'll stop soon when the heat peaks to rest under makeshift tents. You imagine sprawling on a silk cushion, the fabric cool against your skin, and you almost laugh at the thought. Who has time for luxury out here? As you trudge on, the caravan's dust clouds blur the horizon, and you catch a whiff of something sweet, maybe dried apricots from a trader's pack. It's a small comfort, but it's enough to keep you moving. The Silk Road's not just about silk, it's about survival stories and the promise of rest at the next oasis. You're already wondering what's waiting there, but for now you keep step with the camels, their bells jingling softly, lulling you forward. You're in a dimly lit workshop now, somewhere in a quiet corner of Chang'an, where the air hums with the soft clack of looms and the faint rustle of silk threads. Your boots scuff against a floor dusted with mulberry leaves, and the scent of boiled cocoons, earthy, slightly sour, tickles your nose. You're watching weavers, mostly women, their fingers dancing over wooden frames, turning raw silk into shimmering cloth. The rhythm's mesmerizing like a slow heartbeat, each thread pulled taut with a precision that could lull you to sleep if you stared too long. But don't get too cozy. You'd probably snag a thread and ruin a week's work, earning glares sharper than any dagger. The mainstream fact is that silk production was a cornerstone of the Tang Dynasty's economy around 700 CE. The imperial court tightly controlled sericulture from mulberry groves to weaving workshops, ensuring only the finest silk reached the Silk Road. It was a state secret. Leaking the process could land you in serious trouble, maybe even a one-way trip to a dungeon. But here's the quirky tidbit: some weavers believe silkworms had souls. You see a woman murmur a soft chant to a basket of cocoons, thanking them for their sacrifice. It's sweet, a bit odd, and you can't help but wonder if she's half asleep herself. Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual or just a way to stay sane during endless hours at the loom. You step closer, peering at a loom where a young weaver creates a pattern of clouds in jade-green silk. Her hands move like she's playing an instrument, each motion deliberate, almost hypnotic. You notice a small clay lamp flickering nearby, casting shadows that dance across the fabric. It's beautiful, but you're clumsy enough to knock it over, so you keep your distance. The weaver glances up, offering a tired smile, and you're struck by how young she looks, barely older than a teenager. You joke to yourself that her job's the original ASMR, all soft clicks and rustles, perfect for drifting off. The workshop's air is warm, heavy with the scent of steamed silk and wood polish. You spot a pile of discarded cocoons in a corner, their pearly shells cracked open like tiny empty homes. It's a reminder of the labor behind every bolt silkworm, spinning for weeks only to be boiled before they hatch. You wince, then catch yourself. It's just how things work here. A weaver nearby stretches her back, popping loudly, and you chuckle. She's probably dreaming of a nap as much as you are. The Tang valued silk so much that even these workers, often from poor families, took pride in their craft. Their cloth-dressed emperors draped temples and traveled thousands of miles to foreign courts. As you linger, the loom's rhythm seeps into you, slowing your breath. You imagine lying on a silk mat, the fabric cool and smooth, while the workshop's sounds fade into a distant hum. Outside the city buzzes, but here it's just you, the weavers, and the quiet magic of silk coming to life. You're tempted to sit, maybe sneak a quick snooze, but the next part of the journey's calling out where the silk leaves Chang'an for the wilds of the Silk Road. You're sprawled under a patchy canvas tent, the desert sun blazing outside as you rest with a caravan of Silk Road traders. The air's thick with the smell of sweat-soaked leather and the faint sweetness of dried dates tucked in a nearby sack. Camels grumble their bells, clinking softly while the wind hums across the dunes, kicking up sand that stings your cheeks. You're bone-tired, your legs aching from hours of trudging, and you're pretty sure you'd flop face first into a cactus if you tried standing now. The traders around you, though, seem unfazed, lounging on coarse blankets, some already snoring. Their naptime rituals are your only shot at surviving this heat. The mainstream fact is that camels were the backbone of the Silk Road during the Tang Dynasty around 750 CE. These shaggy beasts could carry up to 500 pounds of silk across deserts going days, without water making them worth more than gold to merchants. But here's the quirky bit: some drivers swore by camel milk tea as a sleep aid. You watch a grizzled trader stir a steaming cup, claiming it knocks him out faster than a lullaby. You're skeptical, it smells like warm socks, but you're tempted to try it. Historians still argue whether these rest recipes were effective or just placebo, a debate as old as the dunes themselves. You shift on the hard ground, a silk bundle under your head acting as a makeshift pillow. It's surprisingly soft, cool against your skin, and you get why traders guarded these bales like treasure. The caravan leader, a wiry man with a beard like tangled wire, passes around a water skin. You take a sip, wincing at the metallic tang, and he grins, saying it's desert vintage. You laugh, but it's weak, you're too parched for wit. Nearby, a young driver sketches patterns in the sand, muttering about constellations. These guys navigate by stars, timing naps when the sky's clearest, a trick that's half science, half poetry. The tense shade is a mercy, but the heat still presses in, making your eyelids heavy. You notice a trader wrapping a silk scarf around his face, not for style, but to block the sand while he dozes. Smart move, you're half buried already, and you're not sure your sneezes are historically accurate. The caravan's rhythm slows as more men drift off their snores, blending with the wind's low moan. It's oddly soothing, like a natural white noise machine. You imagine the silk bales beside you, destined for distant bazaars carrying dreams of wealth, and maybe a good nap for someone else. As you lie there, the desert's vastness sinks in. The Silk Road's not just a path, it's a lifeline tying Chang'an to places you'll never see. You chuckle thinking of that camel milk tea again. Maybe it's not so bad if it means sleeping through this heat. The caravan will move again at dusk, but for now you're content to rest the silk's soft promise, lulling you toward a doze. You're gliding through the imperial palace in Luoyang, now one of the Tang Dynasty's glittering capitals, where silk drapes every surface like a second skin. The air smells of jasmine incense, and your sandals whisper against polished wooden floors as you pass courtiers in robes so fine they shimmer like water. You're out of place here, a dusty wanderer from the caravan trails, and you're pretty sure one wrong move like bumping a jade vase would get you banished to scrub camel hooves for life. The palace hums with quiet power and silks the star-turning rooms into glowing showcases of wealth and status. The mainstream fact is that during the Tang Dynasty around 750 CE, silk was a symbol of imperial might. Emperors like Xuanzong used it to flaunt wealth, gifting bolts to foreign envoys, or draping entire halls in crimson and gold for banquets. But here's the quirky tidbit: some courtiers wore silk sashes dyed with rare shellfish purple, so expensive it cost more than a village's yearly rice harvest. You spot a noble adjusting his sash, preening like a peacock, and you smirk. Fashion's always been a wallet killer. Historians still argue whether these displays bankrupted the court or just dazzled rivals into submission. You pause by a massive silk screen painted with cranes, its folds catching the flicker of oil lamps. The fabric's so light it sways with every breath, and you're tempted to touch it, but a stern guard's glare stops you cold. Instead, you watch a palace maid smooth a silk canopy over a low couch, probably for some official's mid-afternoon nap. The Tang elite loved their siestas, and silk made them divine, cool, soft, and obscenely luxurious. You imagine flopping onto that couch, but you'd probably snore loud enough to spark a diplomatic incident. The hall opens to a garden where silk banners flutter above a koi pond. You catch a whiff of lotus blossoms and hear a lute's soft plucking, someone's practicing for tonight's feast. A courtier nearby brags about his new silk fan, waving it like he's conducting an orchestra. You roll your eyes, it's just a fancy hand cooler, but he acts like it's the key to immortality. You chuckle thinking of the weavers back in Chang'an, slaving over looms while this guy poses. The palace's opulence is dizzying, but it's also oddly calming, the silk sheen, pulling you into a dreamlike haze. Silk here isn't just decor, it's currency status, even diplomacy. You overhear two officials whispering about a silk tribute sent to appease a northern tribe. It's wild to think a few yards of fabric could stop a war, but that's the Tang for you. As you wander deeper into the palace, the air grows heavier, the light softer. You're starting to feel that Naptime pull yourself the silk all around you, whispering rest. The caravan's dust feels far away now, but you know this luxury began there, with those creaking carts and grumpy camels. You're in a quiet Buddhist monastery now tucked into the hills outside Chang'an, where the air smells of cedar incense and old parchment. The soft shuffle of monks' robes brushes past you as you stand in a candlelit scriptorium, watching scribes copy sacred sutras onto silk scrolls. The fabric gleams under flickering light, each stroke of their brushes deliberate, almost meditative. You're trying to stay silent, but your sandals squeak on the stone floor, and you're pretty sure you'd knock over an ink pot if you got any closer. This place is all about focus, and you're about as graceful as a camel in a pottery shop. The mainstream fact is that during the Tang Dynasty, around 750 CE, Buddhism flourished, and silk scrolls were prized for preserving sacred texts. Monasteries like this one were hubs of learning, translating Sanskrit sutras into Chinese, often on silk for durability and prestige. But here's the quirky tidbit: some monks believed copying sutras helped them achieve a dreamlike state closer to enlightenment. You watch a monk pause, eyes half closed, as if the silk itself is lulling him into a trance. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual discipline or just the monotony of endless calligraphy. Either way, it's sleepy work. You lean closer, catching the faint scratch of brush on silk, a sound so soft it's like a whisper. The scroll before you shows delicate characters, each one a prayer for peace or wisdom. The silk's texture makes the ink glow, and you're mesmerized, though you'd probably smudge the whole thing if you tried it yourself. A young novice nearby yawns, then catches himself blushing. You grin, guess even holy work can't fight off a nap. The monastery's rhythm is slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat winding down, and you feel your own pulse slowing too. The monks don't just write, they live with silk. You notice their robes dyed saffron shimmer faintly as they move. Some say the dye came from distant India, carried along the Silk Road with the texts themselves. You imagine those caravan camels, grumpy as ever, hauling bolts of this very fabric. A monk offers you a cup of barley tea, its warmth soothing your hands. It's plain earthy, and you joke to yourself, it's the decaf of the Tang Dynasty. The gesture's kind, though, and you sip slowly, watching the scribes work in silence, their focus almost contagious. Outside, a bell chimes low and resonant, signaling evening prayers. The sound blends with the scriptorium's quiet, pulling you deeper into a calm haze. You spot a silk banner hanging on the wall embroidered with a lotus flower, and it sways gently in a breeze you can't feel. It's easy to see why this place feels sacred. Silk words and stillness weave together, making even a skeptic like you consider a quick meditation nap. The Silk Road brought more than goods here. It carried ideas, faiths, and a strange kind of peace that's settling over you now. You're weaving through a bustling Silk Road oasis town, maybe Dunhuang, where traders from across the world collide in a haze of dust and chatter. The air's alive with the scent of grilled lamb and exotic spices, and you're dodging Sogdian merchants with twirling mustaches and Chinese locals haggling over silk bolts. Their voices blend into a chaotic hum, Persian, Turkic, Mandarin, like a marketplace symphony that could either wake you up or lull you into a daze. You're out of your depth here. One wrong haggle and you'd probably trade your shoes for a handful of raisins. But the energy's infectious, and the cultural mashup around you feels like a dream you're not quite sure you're in. The mainstream fact is that the Silk Road, peaking under the Tang Dynasty around 750 CE, was a cultural crossroads blending art music and ideas from Persia, India, and China. Sogdian traders hailing from modern-day Uzbekistan were key players acting as middlemen who carried silk east and west. But here's the quirky tidbit: some Sogdians sang lullabies to calm their kids, weaving Chinese myths into Persian tunes. You overhear a merchant crooning to his daughter, the melody strange yet soothing, and you wonder if it's half Zoroastrian, half Taoist. Historians still argue whether these hybrid songs shaped Tang poetry or were just bedtime tricks to quiet fussy kids. You pause by a stall where a Sogdian trader unrolls a silk bolt painted with swirling vines trying to charm a Chinese buyer. The fabric's so vibrant it seems to glow, and you're tempted to touch it, but you'd probably trip over a nearby basket of pomegranates. Instead, you watch the buyer nod unimpressed, and you chuckle, tough crowd. The market's a sensory overload, with silk banners flapping above dyed in colors you didn't know existed. A passing camel snorts, and you jump, earning a grin from a kid selling sesame cakes. You're starting to think this place is one big chaotic nap waiting to happen. The Sogdians bring more than silk, they carry stories. You catch a snippet of one, a tale of a desert spirit who guards sleeping travelers. It's probably nonsense, but the way the trader tells it, low and rhythmic, makes you yawn. The oasis town's a melting pot, and you spot Buddhist monks, Zoroastrian priests, even a Nestorian Christian scribbling on a silk scrap. Each group adds to the hum, their rituals and languages mixing like a dream you can't pin down. You buy a skewer of lamb, the grease warm on your fingers, and it's so good you almost forgive the sand in your teeth. As the sun dips, the market softens, and you feel the day's weight settling in. You imagine curling up under a silk canopy, the Sogdian lullaby still echoing in your head. The Silk Road's not just trade, it's a bridge of cultures, and right now it's pulling you toward a restful haze, one story at a time. You're sitting cross-legged in a smoky tea house somewhere along the Silk Road's winding path, maybe in Lanzhou. The air's thick with the scent of roasted tea leaves and charred wood, and the low hum of conversation wraps around you like a warm blanket. You're nursing a chipped clay cup of green tea, its bitterness cutting through the dust in your throat from that caravan trek. Remember those grumpy camels? The tea house is a haven for merchants. Their voices rising and falling as they swap stories of far-off lands, each tale wilder than the last. You're trying to blend in, but you'd probably spill your tea if anyone asked you to haggle over a silk bolt. The mainstream fact is that tea houses were vital social hubs in the Tang Dynasty around 750 CE, where Silk Road traders exchanged not just goods, but gossip, news, and cultural tidbits. These spots were like the internet of their day, buzzing with info from Persia to Japan. But here's the quirky bit: some merchants claimed tea sharpened their dreams, making naps more vivid. You overhear a grizzled trader swear his afternoon siesta showed him a Samarkand market in color. You smirk, thinking it's probably just the caffeine talking, but historians still argue whether these dream teas were herbal blends or pure placebo. You lean back, the wooden bench creaking under you, and watch a merchant unroll a silk scarf to show off a deal. The fabric catches the lantern, light shimmering like a desert mirage, and you're half hypnotized. A serving boy refills your cup, and you nod thanks, though. You're pretty sure you're overpaying for this brew. The tea's warm, and you sip slowly, letting the bitterness ground you. Nearby, a trader spins a yarn about a bandit who stole silk but got lost in a sandstorm. Poetic justice, you think, chuckling. The story's rhythm, low and droning, makes your eyelids heavy like the tea's working its magic. The tea house walls are hung with silk tapestries, some frayed from years of smoke and chatter. You spot one with a faded dragon, its claws clutching a cloud, and you wonder if it came from that Sogdian trader's lullaby town. A group of Wugger merchants laughs loudly, slamming their cups down, and you jump, nearly spilling your tea. You laugh at yourself, smooth-moved desert wanderer. These tea houses were where cultures mixed, where a Chinese poet might overhear a Persian tale and weave it into a verse. The air's alive with possibility, but also heavy, pulling you toward a nap you're not fighting. As you sip again, the tea's warmth spreads, and the voices blur into a soothing drone. You imagine curling up in the corner, maybe on a silk cushion if you're lucky. The Silk Road stories are endless, but right now this tea house feels like the perfect place to drift the gossip fading into a soft, sleepy hum. You're slipping into a modest Tang Dynasty home now, somewhere in a quiet Chang'an alley far from the palace's glitz. The air smells of steamed rice and faintly of sesame oil, and you're standing in a small bedroom lit by a single oil lamp. Silk curtains hang over a narrow window, their soft sheen catching the flicker, and a low wooden bed is draped with a silk coverlet smooth as a still pond. You're out of place here, a dusty traveler among domestic calm, and you'd probably trip over the threshold and wake the whole household. This is where silk meets sleep, not in grand courts, but in the quiet of everyday life. The mainstream fact is that by the mid-Tang dynasty, around 750 CE, silk had trickled down from emperors to commoners, well, the moderately wealthy ones anyway. Artisans and minor officials could afford silk bedding, prized for its coolness and durability. But here's the quirky tidbit: some families tuck lavender or mugwort into silk pillowcases, believing the herbs warded off nightmares. You spot a small sachet under a pillow, its faint floral scent mingling with the room's warmth, and you wonder if it really works. Historians still argue whether these herbal tricks were folk medicine or just a way to make stuffy rooms smell better. You step closer, the floorboards creaking softly, and run your fingers along the silk coverlet. It's not palace grade, but it's buttery smooth, and you imagine sinking into it after a long day. The bed's occupant, probably a scribe or shopkeeper, is out, leaving the room still almost sacred. You notice a child's toy, a silk kite shaped like a fish tucked in a corner. You chuckle, thinking of that dragon kite from Chang'an's market buzzing with chaos. This home's quieter, but it's got the same Silk Road heartbeat, thanks to those caravan camels you're starting to miss. The silk here isn't just for show, it's practical. You see a small loom in the corner where the family might weave their own cloth, maybe for extra income. A woman's shawl dyed a soft plum hangs nearby, and you're tempted to touch it, but hold back, your dusty hands would leave a mark. Instead, you sit on a stool, the wood worn smooth by years of use, and let the room's calm wash over you. It's easy to see why silk bedding was a game changer: cool in summer, warm in winter, and a little luxurious even for regular folks. You joke to yourself that it's the Tang version of memory foam. Outside, a neighbor's dog yaps and you flinch, laughing at your own jumpiness. The lamp's flame wavers, casting shadows that dance across the silk, and you feel your shoulders relax. This bedroom's a far cry from the tea house's chatter or the desert's grind, but it's tied to them by that shimmering thread. You're starting to crave a nap yourself, the silk's promise of rest pulling you under, like a gentle tide. You're back in Chang'an's West Market now, but it's night and the vibe's shifted to a lantern-lit frenzy. The air's cool, tinged with the smoky sweetness of roasted chestnuts and the sharp tang of ink from nearby scribes. You're weaving through a crowd at a silk auction where merchants shout bids over bolts of shimmering cloth piled high on wooden tables. The silk glows under flickering light jade, green sunset, red midnight blue, and you're half dazzled, half worried you'll trip over a stray sandal and crash the whole show. These auctions are where dreams are bought and sold, and you'd probably bid your last coin on a scarf just to feel fancy. The mainstream fact is that during the Tang Dynasty, around 750 CE, night markets in Chang'an were economic powerhouses with silk auctions driving trade and wealth. These events drew traders from across the Silk Road, turning fabric into fortunes overnight. But here's the quirky tidbit: some bidders use silk scraps as IOUs, scribbling promises on the cloth itself. You spot a merchant waving a silk strip with inky characters, grinning like it's cash. Historians still argue whether this was a clever credit system or just a recipe for chaos when debts came due. You edge closer to the auctioneer, a loud man with a voice like a temple gong, calling out prices in rapid-fire Mandarin. A bolt of cloud-patterned silk goes for the price of a horse, and you whistle under your breath, your wallet's crying just watching. A nearby trader, maybe Sogdian, winks and offers you a sip of rice wine from a flask. It's warm, slightly sweet, and you cough, earning a laugh. You're starting to think these merchants drink to stay awake, not to sleep, but the wine's loosening you up, making the market's hum feel like a lullaby. The crowd's a mix of locals and foreigners, their robes a patchwork of Silk Road styles, Persian embroidery, Uyghur felt caps, even a monk's saffron silk. You notice a woman fanning herself with a silk fan painted with peonies, and you chuckle, fancy, but it's just a breeze maker. The auction's rhythm is relentless, yet oddly soothing, like waves lapping at a shore. You imagine the silk on those tables traveling far, maybe to a palace or a nomad's tent carrying the market's energy with it. A kid darts past waving a silk ribbon like a flag, and you grin same energy as that kite from the alley house. As the night deepens, the crowd thins, and you feel the weight of the day settling in. You lean against a stall, the silk's glow fading as lanterns dim. The auction's still going, but your eyelids are heavy, and you're dreaming of a silk pillow, maybe one with that lavender sachet from the bedroom. The Silk Road's wealth is dazzling, but right now it's the promise of rest that's calling you. You're out on the windswept steps now, far from Chang'an's glow, crouching in the flickering warmth of a nomad's tent. The air smells of boiled mutton and damp wool, and the silk flaps hanging at the entrance flutter in the twilight breeze. You're with a group of Turkic nomads, their faces weathered, swapping stories as they barter silk for sleek horses. The tent's cozy but cramped, and you're pretty sure you'd knock over a pot of stew if you stood up too fast. These folks live by the rhythm of the plains, and their naptime trades are as vital as any Chang'an market. The mainstream fact is that during the Tang Dynasty, around 750 CE, nomadic tribes like the Turks and Uyghurs were key Silk Road players, trading horses for silk to fuel Tang armies and caravans. Their mobility kept the routes alive, linking China to Central Asia. But here's the quirky tidbit: some nomads used silk as tent insulation, stitching it into layers to block the steps' biting winds. You notice a silk-lined wall, its faint shimmer catching the firelight, and you're impressed, cozy and classy. Historians still argue whether this was practical or a flex to show off trade connections. You shift on a felt mat, the ground hard beneath you, and watch a nomad unroll a bolt of crimson silk, inspecting it like a jeweler with a gem. He's trading it for a mare, and the deal's sealed with a nod, no words wasted. You're offered a bowl of fermented mare's milk. Remember that market stall's tangy brew? And you sip cautiously, wincing at the sour kick. The nomad chuckles, his eyes crinkling, and you laugh too, feeling like the city slicker out here. The tense warmth is pulling you in the silk walls, softening the wind's howl into a distant hum. The nomads' lives revolve around movement, but they know how to rest. You see a child curled up on a silk blanket fast asleep, and you're jealous her nap looks comfier than that desert caravan's dusty tent. The fire crackles and a woman hums a low song, maybe one of those Sogdian Chinese lullabies from the oasis. It's soothing, and you're starting to feel the steps' rhythm, slow and steady like a heartbeat. You joke to yourself that these nomads could teach Chang'an's courtiers a thing or two about chilling out. As twilight deepens, the tent grows quieter, the bartering done. You imagine the silk you saw traded here galloping off with a nomad's horse tying the steps to the Silk Road's vast web. Your eyelids droop, the fire's glow blending with the silk's sheen, and you're ready to drift, wrapped in the plain's wild, sleepy calm. You're poking around a cramped apothecary shop in a Silk Road town, maybe Turfan, where the air's heavy with the scent of dried herbs and something faintly medicinal like old licorice. Shelves are stacked with jars of roots and powders, and silk-wrapped bundles line the counter, their soft sheen glowing under a single lantern. You're trying not to sneeze from the dusty air, but you'd probably knock over a shelf of ginseng if you did. This is where Tang Dynasty folks came for sleep fixes, and the apothecaries mixing potions that promise to send you drifting faster than a camel's sway. The mainstream fact is that Tang Dynasty medicine around 750 CE blended Chinese herbal traditions with Silk Road imports, creating remedies for everything from headaches to insomnia. Apothecaries were key stops for traders and locals alike, using ingredients like saffron from Persia or ginseng from Korea. But here's the quirky tidbit: some sleep aids were wrapped in silk pouches, believed to enhance their potency. You spot a tiny silk bag stuffed with mugwort labeled as a dream calmer. Your skeptical sounds like a fancy placebo, but historians still argue whether the silk was symbolic or just kept herbs from spilling. You watch the apothecary, a wiry old man with ink-stained fingers, grind herbs with a mortar and pestle the rhythm slow and hypnotic. He hands you a cup of herbal tea, murky green and smelling like a forest floor. You sip it, wincing at the bitter tang, and he grins, saying it'll make you sleep like a stone. You mutter to yourself that you'd rather have that tea house's rice wine, earning a chuckle from a nearby customer. The shops dim the air thick, and you feel your shoulders relax, the silk bundles around you whispering rest. The apothecary pulls out a silk scroll, unrolling it to reveal a handwritten recipe for an insomnia cure. Jujube seeds, lotus root, and a pinch of something called dragon bone, which you hope is just fossilized rock. You're not brave enough to ask. The scroll's silk is smooth, cool to the touch, and you remember those monastery scribes, their brushes dancing in candlelight. This shop's a different kind of sanctuary, one where sleep is bottled and sold. A woman buys a silk-wrapped sachet, tucking it into her sleeve, and you wonder if she'll dream of the desert caravans that brought it here. As you linger, the shop's quiet hum, clinking jars, soft murmurs starts to pull you under. You imagine curling up on a silk mat, the herbal scent lingering, and you're half convinced this place could cure your own restless nights. The Silk Road didn't just carry goods, it carried remedies, and right now this apothecary's calm is lulling you toward a nap you didn't expect. You're sitting on a low stool in a Chang'an courtyard, the evening air cool and laced with the faint scent of plum blossoms. A poet, ink-stained fingers trembling, slightly recites verses under a flickering lantern, his words weaving silk metaphors into dreams of clouds and rivers. The small crowd scholars, a few merchants, listens their faces, soft in the glow, and you're trying to follow along, but the Mandarin's flowing too fast, and you'd probably mispronounce something and sound like a lost camel driver. The poetry's rhythm is slow, almost hypnotic, and it's pulling you toward a nap despite the hard seat. The mainstream fact is that the Tang Dynasty around 750 CE was a golden age for poetry, with poets like Li Bai and Du Fu crafting verses that often reference silk as a symbol of beauty and transience. Their work was recited in courtyards like this, spreading Silk Road imagery through words. But here's the quirky tidbit: some poets claimed silk scrolls inspired their dreams, saying the fabric's sheen sparked visions of floating landscapes. You watch the poet unroll a silk scroll, his poem inked in sharp black, and you wonder if he's half asleep already. Historians still argue whether these dream verses were artistic genius or just the result of too much rice wine. You shift the stool creaking and catch the poet's eye. He smiles, probably thinking you're a clueless foreigner, and you grin back, feeling like that kid with the silk kite from the market. The poem's about a silk-clad dancer, her sleeves swirling like mist, and the imagery's so vivid you can almost see her. You joke to yourself that it's the Tang version of a music video, all flowy fabric and drama. The crowd murmurs approval, and you clap along, hoping you're not offbeat. The lantern's light dances across the silk scroll, making the ink shimmer, and you feel the courtyard's calm settle into your bones. Silks everywhere in these verses robe sails, even the sky's described as a silk canopy. You remember the palace's shimmering drapes, the nomad's tent walls, and realize silk's not just cloth here, it's a muse. A breeze carries the scent of ink and blossoms, and you're tempted to lie back on the cool stones, let the poetry wash over you. The poet pauses, sipping tea, maybe that apothecary's bitter brew, and you chuckle, imagining him dreaming of silk rivers tonight. The crowd's quiet now, some eyelids drooping, and you're right there with them. The Silk Road brought more than goods. It gave poets stories of distant lands woven into lines that linger like a lullaby. You're starting to drift, the courtyard's soft hum blending with the poet's voice, and you're ready to let the words carry you into a hazy silk-draped sleep. You're slumped against a weathered stone wall in a crumbling caravanserai, a Silk Road rest stop lost somewhere in the Gobi's vast emptiness. The air's dry, smelling of dust and old straw, and the faint snores of sleeping traders mix with the wind's low moan outside. You're surrounded by cracked arches and faded silk banners, their once bright patterns barely visible in the moonlight, filtering through gaps. Your back aches from the hard ground, and you're pretty sure you'd trade a bolt of silk for a proper pillow right now. These rest stops were the Silk Road's oases, where nap time was survival, not luxury. The mainstream fact is that caravanserais built across the Silk Road during the Tang Dynasty, around 750 CE, were vital for traders offering shelter water and a place to rest between grueling treks. They dotted routes from Chang'an to Samarkand, keeping commerce alive. But here's the quirky tidbit: some travelers carved tiny silk charms into the walls, believing they'd bless their sleep with safe dreams. You spot a frayed silk scrap tucked into a crack, its faded red thread barely holding together, and you wonder if it worked. Historians still argue whether these charms were superstition or a way to mark territory in a lawless desert. You shift trying to get comfortable and notice a trader curled up nearby, his head on a silk bundle probably worth more than his camel. The snores around you are uneven like a chorus of tired goats, and you stifle a laugh remembering that camel milk tea from the desert camp. You're offered a sip of water from a leather flask, tepid and gritty, but you take it gratefully, nodding to the grizzled trader who's already half asleep. The caravanserai's walls are etched with travelers' marks, names, prayers, crude camels, and you're tempted to add your own, but you'd probably just scratch your finger. The air's cooling now, the desert night creeping in, and you pull your cloak tighter, wishing for one of those nomads' silk-lined tents. You imagine the traders who passed through here, their dreams filled with market's bandits, or maybe that poet's misty dancers from Chang'an. The silk banners sway gently, their rustle blending with the snores, and it's almost soothing like the looms back in the workshop. You joke to yourself that this place is the Tang Dynasty's version of a roadside motel, basic, but it gets the job done. As you lean back, the stars peek through the roof's gaps, and you feel the weight of the journey settling in. The Silk Road's relentless, but these rest stops, with their tattered silk and shared exhaustion, offer a strange kind of peace. You're ready to drift, the caravanserai's quiet hum pulling you toward sleep. You're standing at the edge of a quiet desert, the Silk Road stretching behind you like a fading dream, its once busy trails now softening under a twilight haze. The air's cool, carrying the faint scent of sage and distant campfires, and you're alone save for the whisper of wind over dunes. Silk scraps, weathered by time, flutter from a lone marker stone, their colors muted but still catching the last light. You're exhausted, your boots caked with dust from markets, caravans, and courtyards, and you'd probably collapse into a nap right here if a camel didn't wander by first. This is where the Silk Road story slows its legacy, lulling you into a gentle drift. The mainstream fact is that by the late Tang Dynasty, around 800 CE, the Silk Road began to decline as political unrest and new sea routes shifted trade away from these desert paths. Chang'an's markets dimmed, and caravanserais like the one you just left started crumbling. But here's the quirky tidbit: some travelers left silk offerings at trail's end, tied to stones as thanks for safe journeys or good dreams. You touch a frayed silk strip, soft as a whisper, and wonder who tied it here. Historians still argue whether these were heartfelt rituals or just litter from forgetful traders. You sit the sand cool beneath you and imagine the Silk Road's heyday. Those creaking carts, the poet's verses, the apothecary's herbs. The silk that wove through it all, from looms to nomad tents, feels like a thread tying you to those stories. You chuckle thinking of that Sogdian lullaby from the oasis, its melody still stuck in your head. The desert's quiet now, the stars brightening, and you feel a yawn coming on, deep and unstoppable. The Silk Road's not gone, it's just resting like you're about to. You lie back, the ground hard but oddly comforting, and pull a silk scarf from your pack, maybe one you borrowed from that auction. It's smooth, cool, and you drape it over your chest, a makeshift blanket. The wind's hum is softer now, blending with memories of Chang'an's bustle, the monastery's calm, the tea house's chatter. You're drifting, the silk's touch grounding you as the world fades. You're sinking deeper now, the desert's vastness folding around you like a soft cocoon. The stars above blur into a gentle glow, each one a story from the Silk Road. Merchants, monks, poets, all resting now, just like you. The silk scarf against your skin feels like a whisper, its coolness easing your breath, slowing your thoughts. There's no rush here, no caravans to chase, no auctions to haggle. Just you, the quiet and the faint rustle of that silk carrying you toward sleep. Picture the dunes stretching out endless and calm, their curves softened by moonlight. The wind's a lullaby, low and steady like the hum of looms or the sway of camels you followed so long ago. Your eyelids are heavy, heavier than those bales of silk, and that's okay. Let them close. The Silk Road's stories are safe, woven into the fabric of time, waiting for you if you wake. For now, there's only this moment, this breath, this gentle drift. Feel your body relax, your shoulders softening, your hands unclenching. The desert's holding you, its silence deeper than any palace hall. The silk's touch lingers, a reminder of journeys past, of markets and monasteries, of lives that dreamed under these same stars. You're part of that now, floating on the edge of sleep where the world's edges blur. Let go, let the quiet take you. The silk road's still there, but for now it's just you, the night, and a soft, endless peace. Sleep well.